The dense foliage of Proxima 6 glowed an eerie blue-violet in the waning light of the system's twin dwarf suns. Wesley Harrington moved carefully between the towering fern-like structures, his environmental suit whispering against the undergrowth. The HUD display inside his helmet continuously monitored the thin atmosphere, displaying readings that would have been lethal without protection. 6 weeks into his expedition, Wesley had learned to move with the deliberate patience required of xenobiologists. His gloved hand swept gently across a cluster of bioluminescent spores, watching as they floated upward in spiral patterns. Into his recorder, he murmured, "Specimen 347. B continues to exhibit helical dispersal patterns when disturbed, suggesting adaptation to Proxima VI's unique magnetic field fluctuations." Wesley smiled to himself, a quiet satisfaction warming his chest. The Alliance Science Division had assigned him this solo mission to catalog new life forms, and every day brought discoveries that could fill volumes of research papers. He was meticulously careful, following every biosafety protocol to the letter, both to protect himself and to minimize his impact on this pristine ecosystem. As twilight settled over the forest, Wesley carefully packed his collection equipment. He was about to head back to his research pod when a distant sound stopped him, something like metal tearing, followed by a thunderous impact that reverberated through the ground beneath his feet. Birds, or bird-like creatures, scattered from the canopy, their long membranous wings flashing in the fading light. Protocol dictated he should report the incident and await instructions. But then another sound reached him, faint but unmistakable, even through his helmet's audio filters. A high-pitched, distressed wail that triggered something primal in his brain. It sounded like a child. Wesley hesitated only a moment before making his decision. "This is Harrington, logging deviation from standard protocol. Investigating possible crash site with potential survivors. Coordinates to follow." He tapped his wrist computer to mark his position, then set off toward the source of the sound. The smoke was visible long before he reached the crash site, an oily black column rising above the treetops. Wesley quickened his pace, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet as he pushed through the increasingly dense vegetation. Breaking through into a newly formed clearing, he stopped abruptly at the sight before him. The vessel was unlike any he had encountered in his years with the Alliance. Sleek and organic in design, its metallic surface shimmered with an iridescent blue-green patina where it wasn't charred or shattered. The craft had carved a deep furrow into the forest floor, uprooting massive plants and scorching the soil with what appeared to be some form of plasma discharge. Wesley approached cautiously, his scanner extended before him. No radiation detected, he muttered to himself, but unusual energy signatures present. Another cry emanated from within the wreckage, weaker than before. Wesley holstered his scanner and climbed over a twisted section of hull. Inside the dim confines of the craft, emergency lights pulsed a soft amber. Most systems appeared dead, with only occasional sparks shooting from ruptured panels. Following the sounds of labored breathing, Wesley pushed deeper into the vessel until he found the source. Pinned beneath a collapsed bulkhead lay a small figure. Wesley's breath caught in his throat. Though humanoid in basic form, the child, for it was clearly a child, possessed emerald green skin with faint luminescent patterns tracing across its face and arms. Pointed ears swept upward from a delicate skull, and when the child's eyes fluttered open in response to his approach, they were solid violet without visible pupils. Blood, deep purple and thick, pooled beneath the trapped body. The child's breathing was shallow and irregular, one arm bent at an unnatural angle. When those strange eyes focused on Wesley, they widened in terror. "It's okay," Wesley said softly, knowing his words wouldn't be understood but hoping his tone might convey his intentions. "I'm going to help you." He quickly assessed the situation. The metal beam pinning the child weighed too much to lift directly, but its position against a damaged wall section gave him leverage. Wesley braced himself and pushed with all his strength against the improvised fulcrum. For several agonizing seconds, nothing happened, Then, with a screech of protesting metal, the beam shifted just enough. "Can you move?" Wesley asked, gesturing with his free hand. The child seemed to understand, and, with a pained whimper, dragged itself a few centimeters clear of the debris. The moment the small form was free, Wesley let the beam crash back down and knelt beside the injured alien. Up close, the injuries were even more severe than he'd initially thought. Multiple fractures, extensive lacerations, and what appeared to be internal bleeding. The child shivered violently, eyes growing unfocused. "Stay with me," Wesley urged, carefully gathering the small body into his arms. The child was surprisingly light, perhaps adapted to the lower gravity of its homeworld. As he lifted the wounded alien, their gazes met again, and Wesley felt something pass between them, a fleeting sensation like a whisper brushing against his consciousness. "I will help you," Wesley promised, his voice resolute as he turned and began the trek back to his research pod. "I will help you." The journey back to his research station felt interminable. Wesley moved as quickly as he dared, trying to minimize jostling the injured child. The alien's breathing grew more labored with each passing minute, its violet eyes opening and closing in irregular intervals. Occasionally, the child would emit soft, unintelligible sounds, perhaps words in its native language, or simply involuntary utterances of pain. Wesley's research pod came into view just as the second sun dipped below the horizon. The prefabricated structure wasn't large, just a main laboratory area, a small sleeping compartment, and basic amenities, but it contained his medical supplies and emergency equipment. Almost there, he murmured to the semi-conscious child as the pod's entry hatch recognized his biosignature and slid open. Inside, Wesley quickly cleared his examination table, sweeping specimen containers and notes aside. He gently laid the child down and activated his emergency medical scanner, calibrating it for unknown xenobiology. While the scanner worked, he retrieved his multi-species medical kit, standard issue for all Alliance xenobiologists, containing treatments theoretically safe for most carbon-based life forms. The scanner beeped, displaying a holographic representation of the child's internal injuries. Multiple fractures, as he'd suspected, along with significant internal hemorrhaging. The child's physiology was remarkably humanoid in overall structure, though with notable differences: a slightly different cardiovascular arrangement, denser bone structure, and what appeared to be secondary respiratory nodules near the base of the throat. Wesley administered a universal pain suppressant through a dermal patch, carefully calibrated to the child's estimated body mass. He then began the delicate work of treating the most life-threatening injuries, first stabilizing the broken limbs with expandable splints, then using a cellular regenerator to slow the internal bleeding. As he worked, Wesley's mind raced. The ship's design was unlike anything in the Alliance database, and certainly not from any of the known spacefaring species in this sector. More troubling were the distinctive blast patterns he'd observed on the hull, energy weapon signatures that suggested a deliberate attack rather than a system failure or navigational accident. The child stirred under his hands, eyes fluttering open, those violet orbs fixed on Wesley with an intensity that made him pause. "Duh. Kir. Mon," the child whispered, the sounds barely audible. "I don't understand your language," Wesley said softly, continuing his treatment. "But I'm trying to help you. You're safe now." The child's eyes closed again, exhaustion claiming its consciousness. Wesley frowned at his scanner readings. They showed stabilization, but the injuries were severe. The child needed more advanced medical care than he could provide in this remote outpost. As night descended fully outside, Wesley sat back, wiping sweat from his brow. He'd done all he could for now. Administered fluids, stabilized the fractures, stopped the worst of the bleeding, and given a broad-spectrum antibiotic safe for most known species. The child now lay in an uneasy sleep, tiny chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Wesley stared at the small green figure on his examination table and felt the weight of responsibility settle heavy on his shoulders. Who was this child? Where had it come from? And who had attacked its vessel? Across the forest, 50 kilometers to the north, a sleek stealth craft descended silently into a hidden ravine. Its adaptive camouflage technology rendered it nearly invisible against the darkening sky. Once landed, its rear hatch opened to disgorge a single figure. Finera stepped onto the alien soil, her tall, muscular frame moving with lethal grace despite her evident exhaustion. Her emerald skin, several shades darker than her child's, gleamed in the moonlight, intricate bioluminescent markings pulsing along her arms and neck, signs of extreme stress among her people. A shock of crimson hair was pulled back in a tight warrior's braid, revealing the pointed ears that marked her Valari heritage. She'd received Mira's distress signal hours ago, but had been forced to approach with extreme caution, knowing Thax's assassins were likely still in the vicinity. Now, as she moved swiftly through the underbrush toward the coordinates of her daughter's ship, her face was a mask of controlled fury and fear. The scene that greeted her at the crash site turned that fear to cold dread. The vessel, the small scout ship in which she'd hidden Mira while she led their pursuers away, lay in ruins. Scorch marks from energy weapons confirmed her worst fears. The assassins had found her child. Drawing her pulse blade, Finera cautiously entered the wreckage. The interior was dark and silent, life support systems long dead. She activated her bio-tracker, calibrated specifically to her daughter's unique genetic signature. It led her to a section of collapsed bulkhead, beneath which lay a pool of dried purple blood. Valari blood, but no child. Finera knelt, touching the blood with trembling fingers. It was hours old. She closed her eyes, extending her senses as she'd been trained. A Valari warrior could track their own bloodline across star systems if necessary, an evolutionary adaptation that had once helped their species survive on their predator-filled homeworld. She sensed Mira, faint but alive. But there was something else, something that made her blood run cold. Around the site of her daughter's blood, there were unmistakable marks of another presence. Footprints unlike any Valari or even Thax's people would make. A discarded medical applicator of unfamiliar design, and faint molecular traces that the bio-tracker identified as human. Humans, Finera hissed, rising to her feet. The Valari had limited contact with humans, but the stories told among her people painted them as dangerous researchers who captured aliens for experimentation. Whether these tales were based in truth or misunderstanding, Finera couldn't say. But the fact remained that her wounded child was now in the hands of a human on this remote world. She followed the trail with single-minded determination, her bio-tracker leading her through the strange blue-violet forest. The trail was clear. A human had taken her child from the wreckage. But why? To save Mira or to exploit her? The child's special abilities, the telepathic gifts that made her so valuable and so dangerous, would be immediately apparent to anyone who made physical contact with her. It was these same gifts that had marked Mira for death. Thax, the power-hungry commander of the Hegemony's special forces, considered telepathically gifted Valari a threat to his control. He'd ordered the systematic elimination of all such individuals, claiming they posed a security risk. Finera and her child had been running for nearly a year, staying one step ahead of his assassins. Until now, as Finera moved through the alien forest, her resolve hardened. She would find this human. She would reclaim her child. And if Mira had been harmed further, she would exact vengeance, as was her right under Valari law. The bio-tracker pulsed, indicating a stronger signal ahead. Finera quickened her pace, the forest blurring around her as she ran toward the only thing that mattered in the universe, her daughter. Back at the research pod, Wesley jerked awake from an uncomfortable doze in his chair. Something had disturbed him, a sound perhaps, or just the instinctive awareness that comes from years of fieldwork on potentially dangerous worlds. He glanced at the child, who remained unconscious but stable, then at the security display. Nothing registered on the perimeter sensors, but Wesley's unease persisted. He rose quietly and dimmed the pod's interior lights, moving to the small armored window to scan the surrounding forest. The alien child suddenly gasped, body arching slightly before settling back into stillness. Wesley turned back, medical scanner in hand, and was startled to see the child's eyes open, staring directly at him with unmistakable intelligence despite the pain clouding those violet orbs. When the child reached out a trembling hand, Wesley moved to its side without hesitation. As their fingers touched, Wesley experienced that same fleeting sensation he'd felt earlier, but stronger now, more defined. A pressure behind his eyes, a whisper of thoughts, not his own. He stumbled slightly, catching himself on the edge of the examination table. "You're telepathic," he whispered, astonished. The child's eyes closed again, the brief moment of consciousness exhausted. Wesley stood frozen, processing what had just happened. Telepathic species were extremely rare in the known galaxy, and highly valued or feared, depending on one's perspective. If this child possessed such abilities, it might explain the attack on its vessel. A soft alert from his perimeter sensors broke his reverie. Something was approaching from the north, something moving too deliberately to be local wildlife. Wesley accessed the external cameras, but in the darkness of the alien night, he could make out only a shadowy figure moving with practiced stealth toward his pod. Heart racing, Wesley checked his sidearm, standard issue, meant more for defense against wildlife than combat, and positioned himself between the approaching figure and the injured child. The pod's reinforced structure would withstand most conventional attacks, but he wasn't naive enough to believe it would stop a determined opponent with military-grade weapons. Minutes passed in tense silence. The sensors indicated the figure had stopped just outside visual range, as if studying the pod and its defenses. Wesley briefly considered sending an emergency transmission to the Alliance, but discarded the idea. Help was days away at best, and a transmission might only draw more unwanted attention. Without warning, the power in the pod flickered, exterior systems going offline one by one. Someone was systematically disabling his research station's security measures. Wesley tightened his grip on his weapon and waited. The main entrance hissed open with surprising quickness, and before Wesley could react, a tall figure had slipped inside. In the dim emergency lighting, he caught impressions rather than details. Towering height, muscular build, skin the same emerald hue as the child's, and eyes that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "Don't move, human." The voice was distinctly feminine despite its harsh tone, the words slightly accented but understandable. "My blade is aimed at your vital organs." Wesley became aware of the weapon pointed at him, some sort of energy blade that hummed with lethal promise. He carefully raised his hands, sidearm pointed upward. "I'm not here to hurt anyone," he said evenly. "I'm a scientist. I found the child in a crashed vessel and brought it here for treatment." The tall figure, clearly of the same species as the child, narrowed her glowing eyes. "You expect me to believe a human would help a Valari child out of simple kindness? Your kind are known to us as dissectors and experimenters on alien life." "That's not true," Wesley protested, though he knew too well there were humans in the Alliance's history who had earned such a reputation. "I'm a xenobiologist. I study life, I don't harm it. The child was dying. I couldn't leave it there." The warrior corrected coldly. "Not it. Her name is Mira, and she is my daughter." Wesley nodded slowly. "Your daughter needs medical attention beyond what I can provide here. She has internal injuries I've only managed to stabilize temporarily." The woman, Mira's mother, stepped further into the light, and Wesley could now see her features clearly. She was strikingly beautiful in an alien way, with sharp cheekbones and a proud bearing that spoke of military training. The intricate patterns on her skin glowed with a blue-violet light that matched the forest outside. "Step away from her," she commanded, gesturing with the energy blade. Wesley complied, moving slowly to one side. "May I know your name?" A moment's hesitation, then, "I am Finera, First Blade of House Valari." Her gaze never left his as she approached the examination table where her daughter lay. With her free hand, she touched the child's forehead in a gesture of unmistakable tenderness that contrasted sharply with her aggressive stance. "What have you done to her?" Finera demanded, noting the medical devices attached to her daughter. "Pain management, fluid replacement, cellular regeneration to slow internal bleeding. Wesley explained, keeping his voice calm and professional. Basic emergency care, but she needs surgery and more sophisticated treatment than I can provide here. Finara's expression remained suspicious, but her eyes darted to the medical scanner displaying her daughter's vital signs. She clearly understood enough of the technology to recognize that Mira's condition, while critical, had been stabilized. Before the tense standoff could resolve, Mira suddenly convulsed on the table, her small body shaking violently. The medical scanner blared an alarm. Her heart rate was dropping precipitously. "She's going into shock," Wesley said urgently. "I need to help her now, or she'll die." Finara hesitated only a fraction of a second before lowering her weapon slightly. "Save her," she commanded, though fear had replaced some of the hostility in her voice. Wesley moved quickly, administering a cardiac stimulant and adjusting the fluid drip. "I need you to hold her still," he instructed, and Finara immediately complied, gently but firmly restraining her daughter's convulsing form. For several tense minutes, they worked together, Wesley providing medical directives, Finara executing them with precise movements. Gradually, Mira's condition stabilized again, though the medical scanner continued to show concerning fluctuations in her vital signs. "She needs more advanced care," Wesley said, wiping sweat from his brow. "My supplies and equipment here are limited." Finara looked down at her daughter, conflict evident in her expression. "I cannot take her to a Valari medical facility. We are being hunted." "By whom?" Wesley asked, though. He suspected he knew the answer based on the blast patterns he'd observed on the crashed vessel. "Thax's assassins," Finara confirmed grimly. "They seek to eliminate all Valari with telepathic abilities. Mira's gifts are exceptionally strong. She can forge mental connections even with non-Valari species." A pointed look at Wesley suggested she knew about the brief mental contact he'd experienced with her daughter. Before Wesley could respond, a proximity alert, one of the few systems still functioning, emitted a shrill warning. Multiple figures were approaching the pod from all directions. "They've found us," Finara hissed, energy blade raised once more. Wesley moved to the security console, bringing up thermal imaging of the surroundings. At least 6 humanoid figures were closing in, moving with military precision. "Friends of yours?" he asked grimly. "Thax sends his best hunters for us," Finara replied, a cold smile playing at her lips. "It seems he considers us quite valuable." A decision crystallized in Wesley's mind. Whatever politics were at play here, one fact remained clear. An innocent child's life hung in the balance. "We need to evacuate," he said firmly. "I have a research shuttle capable of breaking atmosphere. We can take Mira somewhere safe for treatment." Finara's eyes narrowed. "Why would you help us, human? You owe us nothing." "My name is Wesley," he replied, already gathering essential medical supplies. "And I help because it's right. Because your daughter deserves a chance to live." He met her gaze steadily. "You can trust me or kill me. But if you choose the latter, Mira's chances of survival drop significantly." For a long moment, Finara stood motionless, clearly weighing her options. Then an explosion rocked the exterior of the pod, making her decision for her. "Where is this shuttle of yours?" she asked, already moving to gather her unconscious daughter in her arms. Wesley led the way to a concealed panel in the floor, revealing a small hatch. "Underground passage to the landing pad," he explained, punching in a code that caused the hatch to slide open. "Standard safety measure on frontier worlds." Another explosion, closer this time, sent equipment crashing to the floor. The pod structure wouldn't withstand a sustained assault. "Go," Wesley urged, handing Finara a portable medical stabilizer to attach to Mira. "I'll initiate the pod's self-destruct sequence to cover our escape." Finara hesitated, then nodded once, the barest acknowledgement of cooperation, before descending through the hatch with her daughter cradled against her chest. Wesley quickly programmed the pod systems for delayed destruction, gathering his emergency pack and research data core. As he prepared to follow, a section of the pod's exterior wall buckled inward from a direct hit. Through the newly formed gap, Wesley caught a glimpse of their attackers. Humanoid figures in sleek armor, wielding advanced energy weapons. He dropped through the hatch, sealing it behind him just as weapons fire tore through the space he'd occupied seconds before. The underground passage was dimly lit by emergency strips, leading 50 meters to where his shuttle waited. Finera had already reached the small vessel, her tall frame bent awkwardly in the low tunnel. Wesley caught up as she was trying to determine how to open the shuttle's access hatch. "Allow me," he said, reaching past her to press his palm against the biometric scanner. The hatch slid open, revealing the shuttle's compact interior. Essentially a cockpit with 2 pilot seats, a small cargo area, and a fold-down medical berth. "Secure Mira in the medical berth," Wesley instructed as they boarded. "It has built-in life support functions." While Finera tended to her daughter, Wesley slid into the pilot's seat and began the rapid startup sequence. The shuttle's engines hummed to life, just as a distant rumble signaled the destruction of his research pod. "They'll know we've escaped," Finera said, taking the co-pilot's seat after ensuring Mira was securely strapped in. "And they'll have ships in orbit. Then we'll have to be faster and smarter," Wesley replied, hands dancing over the controls. The shuttle rose on repulsor fields, hovering momentarily before shooting forward along a pre-cleared launch path. As they accelerated skyward, the shuttle's sensors detected energy signatures consistent with pursuing craft. Wesley pushed the engines harder, the small vessel shuddering as it punched through the upper atmosphere. "Can this craft outrun them?" Finera asked, her voice tense as she monitored the pursuit on the tactical display. "Not in a straight race," Wesley admitted, "but it has a few tricks." He engaged a series of randomized micro-jumps, short-distance faster-than-light hops that were unpredictable and difficult to track. The stars blurred and shifted around them as the shuttle jumped from point to point within the system. When they finally settled into a stable course, the sensors showed no immediate pursuit. Wesley released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "That should buy us some time, but they'll pick up our trail eventually." Finera nodded, her earlier hostility somewhat tempered by their shared flight. "Where are you taking us?" "Wesley of Earth." "To someone I trust," he replied, programming coordinates into the navigation system. "Dr. Caden Rohr operates an independent research facility in the Ariadne cluster. He's brilliant, specializes in xenobiology and advanced medical techniques. If anyone can help Mira, it's him. And this doctor, he will not report us to your human authorities?" Wesley shook his head. "Caden values knowledge and life above politics. He left the Alliance years ago precisely because he disagreed with some of their policies regarding non-human species." For the first time, Finara's expression showed something other than suspicion or anger, a cautious hope. "How long until we reach this sanctuary?" "Approximately 14 hours at maximum sustainable speed," Wesley answered, checking the medical telemetry being transmitted from Mira's berth. "Her condition is stable for now, but we should monitor her closely during the journey." Finera rose and moved to her daughter's side, gently stroking the child's forehead. "You continue to surprise me, human," she said without looking up. "I expected to find my daughter being dissected in your laboratory, not treated with care." "Not all humans are the same," Wesley said quietly. "Just as I imagine, not all Valari are warriors like yourself." A faint smile touched Finara's lips. "True enough. Before the conflicts with Thax's hegemony forced me into a warrior's path, I was a cultural historian, studying the interactions between sentient species." Wesley raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. "Then perhaps we have more in common than either of us first thought." Their gazes met across the small cabin, a moment of understanding amid the chaos of their situation. Then Mira stirred, making a soft sound of distress, and both adults turned their attention immediately to the child. "She's dreaming," Finera murmured, concern etching her features. When Valari with her gifts dream while injured, the mental projections can be intense. As if in response to her mother's words, Mira's hand reached out, fingers grasping at the air. Wesley, standing nearby, instinctively took the small green hand in his own. The connection that formed was immediate and overwhelming, stronger than the previous fleeting touches. Images flooded Wesley's mind. A peaceful world with twin moons, a home filled with light, then darkness and fire as armored soldiers burst in. Fear, confusion, the sensation of flight across cold space. Most poignantly, he felt Mira's pain and her desperate wish for safety. When the connection broke, Wesley found himself gripping the edge of the medical berth for support, his breathing ragged. Finera was staring at him with wide eyes. "You formed a full link with her," she said, voice hushed with what sounded like awe. "That should not be possible for a human." Wesley shook his head, trying to clear the lingering impressions of Mira's memories. "I don't understand it either. But I saw. I felt." "You experienced her memories," Finera explained, a new respect in her tone. "Specifically, the memories that currently dominate her unconscious mind. Our flight from Thax, the attack." She studied him intently. Few non-Valari can withstand such contact without mental damage. "You are unusual, Wesley of Earth." Before he could respond, the shuttle's proximity alert sounded. A vessel was approaching rapidly from the port side. "They found us," Wesley said grimly, returning to the pilot's seat. The shuttle's sensors identified the approaching craft as a hegemony interceptor. Fast, well-armed, and definitely not friendly. "Can we outrun it?" Finera asked, strapping herself into the co-pilot's seat. "Not likely," Wesley replied, already implementing evasive maneuvers. "But we might be able to outthink them." The shuttle banked sharply, diving toward a nearby asteroid field. The interceptor followed, firing warning shots that streaked past their viewport. "They want to disable us, not destroy us," Finera observed. "They want Mira alive." "Small comfort," Wesley muttered, threading the shuttle between two massive asteroids. "Hold on, this is going to get rough." For the next 20 minutes, they engaged in a deadly game of cat and mouse through the asteroid field. Wesley pushed the shuttle to its limits, using the natural obstacles to screen their movements and occasionally double back to confuse their pursuers. The interceptor, though faster and better armed, was larger and less maneuverable in the dense field. Eventually, Wesley managed to slip behind a particularly large asteroid, kill the shuttle's main power signature, and drift silently as the interceptor passed by. Their position. "Clever," Finera acknowledged as they watched the enemy ship continue its search pattern away from them. "But temporary. They'll realize their error soon enough." "We don't need much time," Wesley said, bringing the shuttle's systems back online. "Just enough for a single micro-jump to clear the field, then we can make a proper jump to the Ariadne cluster." As he spoke, he initiated the micro-jump sequence. The stars blurred momentarily, and then they were clear of the asteroid field. Without wasting a second, Wesley engaged the main FTL drive, and the shuttle leapt forward into hyperspace, leaving their pursuers far behind. With immediate danger averted, they both relaxed slightly. Wesley set the autopilot and moved to check on Mira, who remained unconscious but stable. "She's strong," he said, studying the medical readouts. "Most beings wouldn't have survived injuries this severe." "Valari children are resilient," Finera replied, coming to stand beside him. "Especially those of the old bloodlines." She hesitated, then added, "I owe you an apology, Wesley, and my gratitude. You saved my daughter when you had no obligation to do so, and now you risk your own safety to help us further." Wesley shook his head. "No apology necessary. I understand your suspicion." He smiled slightly. "I'd probably react the same way if I found my child in the hands of an unknown alien." Finera's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Still, it is not the behavior I was led to expect from humans. Perhaps when this is over, you can revise those cultural history texts of yours," Wesley suggested with a small smile. For the first time, Finera's lips curved in what might have been a genuine smile. "Perhaps I shall." The journey to the Ariadne cluster passed in a state of tense vigilance. Wesley and Finera took turns monitoring Mira and watching the sensors for signs of pursuit. During the quiet hours, they exchanged information, Wesley explaining Alliance territory and politics, Finera sharing what she felt safe revealing about Valari culture and the conflict with Thax's hegemony. Telepathic abilities appear randomly among our people, she explained as they shared a meal of rehydrated rations. For centuries, those with the gift were revered as spiritual leaders and mediators. But Thax sees them differently, as threats to his authority or potential weapons to be controlled. And Mira's abilities are especially strong? Wesley asked. Finnair nodded. Unusually so. Most telepathic Valari can only connect with their own kind, and even then, the link is limited to basic emotions and simple concepts. Mira can form deep connections with any sentient being, accessing memories and complex thoughts. She looked at her daughter's sleeping form. It makes her both precious and dangerous in the eyes of those who seek power. What about you? Wesley asked. Do you have these abilities? No, Finera Riplaiv. But as her blood mother, I have a natural resistance to outside telepathic influence and can sense her presence across vast distances. It's how I track you both through the forest. Their conversation was interrupted by the navigation system announcing their approach to the Ariadne cluster. Wesley returned to the pilot's seat and disengaged the FTL drive, bringing them back to normal space within sight of a small, unremarkable-looking space station orbiting a barren moon. That's Caden's facility? Finera asked, sounding unimpressed. Its appearance is deliberate, Wesley explained, transmitting an identification code to the station. Caden values his privacy and independence. The station looks neglected from the outside, but inside you'll find some of the most advanced research laboratories and medical facilities in this sector. After a brief communication exchange, a docking bay opened in the station's side. Wesley guided the shuttle in with practiced ease, setting it down gently on the designated pad. Will your friend help us without asking too many questions? Finera asked as they prepared to disembark. He'll ask plenty of questions, Wesley replied with a wry smile. But they'll be about Mira's physiology and how best to treat her, not about why you're running or from whom. As the shuttle's hatch opened, they were greeted by a tall, lean man with silver-streaked hair and piercing gray eyes. Dr. Caden Rohr looked every bit the brilliant but eccentric scientist, dressed in a practical lab coat covered in various stains and scorch marks that suggested recent experiments. Wesley, he exclaimed, embracing his former colleague warmly before stepping back to examine the battered shuttle and its occupants. His eyes widened at the sight of Finara's imposing form and Mira's small body on the medical berth. Valari? Fascinating. I've only read about your species in xenobiology journals. The physiological adaptations for telepathic communication are supposed to be remarkable. Doctor, Rohr, Wesley interrupted. This is Finera and her daughter Mira. Mira is severely injured and needs immediate medical attention. Caden's expression immediately shifted from academic excitement to professional focus. He approached the medical berth, already scanning Mira with a handheld device. Multiple fractures, internal hemorrhaging, compromised secondary respiratory system. He muttered, more to himself than to them. And some sort of neural strain. Interesting. He looked up at Finera. Your daughter requires immediate surgery, but I'll need information about Valari physiology, Blue.